Hi, I'm Dr. Mike Venezia here at the Additive Recovery Lab and Treatment Center. Today we're going to talk about how to get the most from your home percussive device. So what we're going to cover is a little bit about myself, what a percussive device actually is, some of the terms that you might have heard around that, and then most importantly, how do we get the most out of our home percussive device? A little bit about myself. Again, my name is Dr. Mike Venezia. I am a practicing chiropractor and chief biomechanist for Additive. Previously, I was on the medical staff or consulted with the Dodgers, the Lakers, and the Kings. I've been in private practice for approximately 15 years, and my specialties are pre- and post-surgical, sports injury, injury prevention, and chiropractic. So the rehab and recovery market has been inundated with home percussive devices or percussive guns recently, and a lot of claims have been circulating out there that they can reduce pain and inflammation, they can increase blood flow, decrease blood pressure, increase mobility, increase flexibility, or even prevent injury. And so what we'll do throughout this conversation is we're actually going to go and dispel some of those myths as well as address a lot of the ones that can be used with a home percussive device. So to start off, most importantly is that we're all on the same page when we're talking about our home percussive device. So we need to make sure we understand the terms of them. Frequency is by far the most important of all of them. Frequency is how fast or how frequent your attachment reciprocates or moves back and forth. So you can kind of think about it as it's going back and forth either very, very fast or very, very slow. The normal range is between 60 and 20 hertz. And so why is this important? Well, there's actually some clinical evidence that shows that frequency can actually affect the physiology of the body. And so between 20 and 30 hertz, we can facilitate proprioception. Proprioception refers to your body's understanding of its own positioning in space. And so what that means, let's say, for instance, when you're running, as your foot strikes the ground, your brain has to perceive where your foot is, how it hits the ground. Does the ground have any extra textures to it, like, let's say, rocks or holes or potholes? Is there a curve or a pitch to the road? Your body has to understand that so it can stabilize the foot and ankle joints, right? So very often, let's say when you're going downstairs and you're looking for that last step and you miss the last step, or you're going up for a layup playing basketball and you're coming down and all of a sudden now the ground isn't there. That's a loss of proprioception. So before exercise, we want to warm up and we want to make sure all the proprioceptive fibers are firing so that your brain is aware that all those joints are ready to go. So what we can do is we can use our BioZoom or our home percussive device around a joint that we're going to use. Now, we're never going to go on the joint space, but we can go around the joint space between 20 and 30 hertz to really wake up those proprioceptive fibers. Between 50 and 60 hertz, we can decrease delayed onset muscle soreness. And all my patients seem to love this one the most. It's basically when you're sore the next day, wouldn't it be nice if we can delay some of that? So inherently, delayed onset muscle soreness is felt from microtrauma sustained from the previous day's exercise. So right after you're done exercising, if we turn on our BioZoom or our home percussive device and we get it up to 50 to 60 hertz and we go through all of the areas that we use during our exercise, we can actually decrease the amount of delayed onset muscle soreness the next day. Unfortunately, if you do it the day after, it's a little bit too late. And while it will work, it's just not going to work as effectively. So we always want to make sure that we're recovering the day of our exercise. Last one is going to be between 30 and 50 hertz, and that's to help muscle relaxation. And then this is a bit of a loaded statement. What we're essentially doing is we're increasing superficial blood flow to affected muscles. And increasing blood flow is going to create a flushing effect. The flushing effect is basically bringing that blood flow into the area, and that's going to provide our muscles with proper nutrition and oxygenation so that they can recover and relax quicker. Next is amplitude. And so amplitude is measured in millimeters. Amplitude is how far the attachment is going to extend from the starting position. So you can assume that it's basically how far from here all the way out is it going to go. Sometimes that's referred to as how hard it makes an impact with the user. And so why is this important? Well, clinically, there is no evidence that amplitude is actually important or that it affects the physiology of the body. Subjectively, or what people are saying, is that the longer or increase the amplitude, it provides a feeling of a harder hit to the affected tissue, and thus a deeper penetration. But again, It hasn't been substantiated with clinical research or evidence. So normally what we try to do is we actually want to discourage our patients from using a higher amplitude. And the reason why is that's also going to increase muscle guarding. And we'll get to muscle guarding later on. But just so that we're on the same page, more amplitude does not mean that you're going to get a depth of penetration or deeper penetration. In fact, all we know is that it actually just creates more of a muscle guarding effect. Next is stall force, and that's measured in pounds of pressure. So stall force is essentially how hard the user can press down against their skin with the device until it stops reciprocating or it turns off. The normal range is between 15 and 60 pounds, so it's a pretty wide range. And again, why is stall force important? Clinically, there is no indication that stall force has any effect physiologically on the body. Subjectively, people will say that the harder one presses into the affected tissue, the deeper the penetration. But again, this hasn't been substantiated by any clinical research. And again, in my private practice, I actually discourage my patients from pressing hard. Rather, we want to make sure you're using proper application, proper form, not just more pressure. So inherently, more is not better. And you can see down below that between 8 and 70 pounds of pressure is the average range. So you can see there's a really wide range of pressure that you can add to different percussive devices before they turn off. So it's not a standardized amount of pressure. And again, we really want to make sure that we're not putting too much pressure that we're doing tissue damage. And lastly are the attachments. And you'll see that percussive devices have a lot of different attachments or different devices you can put into your percussive device. We'll talk about the added attachments. So you'll see here, starting off on the right-hand side, the blue attachment has flat surfaces all around. And that's so that we can actually increase the surface area as we're doing our work. This is really great when we're going and targeting our larger muscle areas, such as your quads, your hamstrings, or let's say your pec major, right? What's nice about this is that it's a higher density foam, so it will keep its shape, but it's also soft enough, again, that it's not going to create a muscle guarding effect. The red attachment is a medium density foam, and this is a bit smaller, and this is great to get into smaller joint spaces, let's say close to your AC joint. Again, we never want to go into a joint or on top of a joint, but we want to get as close as we can without affecting the bursa sac. So the red attachment is really great for this. It'll also work on your popliteal fossa as well. Again, it's softer, so again, we're not increasing the muscle guarding response either. The yellow attachment is a low density foam, and this is really nice for really sensitive areas such as, let's say, your groin or your adductors. We want to make sure that, again, we're not offending the area and that we're going nice and easy into that area. It's also designed with a nap around it so that it can actually grab the tissue and not fall off. And this is also really, really important, especially when we're going into the groin or sensitive areas. We want to make sure that we're attacking or attaching to that tissue and we're not falling off onto other areas that are a little more sensitive and can cause quite a bit of pain and damage. The thumb attachment is a very dense plastic. So this is really great for ischemic compression or when you have those muscle knots that are in your upper trap and you just want to kind of put a thumb in there and hold down tight. So this is, again, a great attachment for that, but we always caution our patients. We want to make sure that you're acclimated to soft tissue work. More is not better. So more pressure doesn't mean that you're going to get more of an effect. It just means that you potentially are going to do more tissue damage. So we want to make sure we're always acclimating, we're pushing down, but we're not pushing into pain. Once you feel the muscle knot relax, then we want to take our biozoom off. We want to let blood come back into the area so that way it flushes and we can recover quicker. The last attachment is our fascial attachment, and this is really quite my favorite. It's a two-pronged attachment, and it's an offset or bifurcated attachment, which is really, really, really nice. What this does is it allows for you to basically target both your fascia layer and your muscle layer. And so fascia is on more tension and it surrounds our muscle. So as we hit the fascia first, it's going to rebound, and with that comes muscle, then we can hit the muscle second. So that way we're getting not just, let's say, a muscular effect, but we're also getting the fascial effect as well. So again, we always caution our patients with this one as well. Make sure that you're attuned or that you're accustomed to deep tissue work, because we never want you to fight while you're doing it. We want to make sure it's a very relaxed and comforting environment. So what does it all mean? Well, it means that we need a lot more work in the scientific realm to substantiate some of the claims that have been made out there. But what we do know is this, is that with proper application of a massage device, that we can actually increase flexibility and range of motion, we can increase blood flow, we can decrease muscle knots, and we can decrease pain sensation. And we'll get into that right now. And really what's important is the proper application of that. We always want to make sure that we're pulling through tension. So the old saying that if you don't use it, you lose it is really, really important here. The body desires motion. In fact, you feel better both physically and mentally when you're active. Soft tissue work should be done with the same intention in mind. We want to make sure that we're avoiding something called creep. And so what creep is basically when you're stagnant or you're not moving, soft tissue undergoes this phenomena where muscles will shorten or contract to a current position. So let's say you're sitting all day long at work and then you get up and you go, well, why does my back ache? Or why do my hips feel really, really tight? Well, it's because those muscles have shortened to that position that you've been in for so long. So the best way to avoid creep, we got to move. So the more you move, the better you're going to feel. And so when a joint is flexed and extended through its full range of motion, muscles and tendons are forced to maintain their physiological range of motion, not this creeped range of motion or not a shortened range of motion. So the proper application when we're using our BioZoom or our home percussive device is that we always want to be pulling through tension because we want to be moving, right? So we want to turn our BioZoom on, we'll cycle it up to the desired intensity or the desired frequency. We're going to gently place the attachment onto the origin of the soft tissue or the muscle that we're addressing. And this is the most important part. We want to flex the joint to make sure that the muscle or the soft tissue is small. So we're not necessarily flexing it so that we're making a big muscle and it's tight, but we want to make sure that it's small, but it's also flaccid or it's smushy, right? Once we have it there, then we're ready to go and actually put the BioZoom onto the area, and we're going to pull through tension. So as we're pushing down and through the muscle, we're going to extend the arm out if we're using the bicep until we get to the very end. We don't want to cross over the elbow. Come on back, and we're going to reset, and we're going to do it again. So we're always pulling through tension. We're always motioning the joint through its full range of motion. This is going to teach the joint how to move. We're going to teach the muscles that they need to stay long. We also want to make sure that, again, we never pass over a joint space, but we stop before it, take our BioZoom off, reset, and then do it again. So we'll show you an example of this with the supraspinatus. In this video, you'll actually see is something from our At-A-Day app. So the nice part about this is that we always want to make sure that you're using proper application. So if you download the At-A-Day app, you will actually guide you through how to use the BioZoom or any of your other home percussive devices as well. It's very important, again, that we have a purpose, we have a direction to drive while we're using our home percussive device. And so you can see here, the model is actually moving his arm behind his back, so he's in internal rotation, pulling through, and you can see the BioZoom up on top, and he's going and he's pulling through, keeping tension onto the supraspinatus the whole entire time. So now we're really doing work because we're pulling tissue through and we're lengthening the muscle at the same time. Most importantly, though, is that most people don't necessarily want to do that much work, and I understand that. So the point and shoot method, something is better than nothing, right? So what we need to make sure, though, is that we have a game plan, right? And this is really, really important. So if you're going to do the point and shoot where you just take your BioZoom or you take your home percussive device and you put it on an area and you don't really do much because you're too tired or you don't have enough energy, I understand. But let's give you a game plan when you're doing that. So we want to make sure we find the muscle knot. So if you can see with our example over here, right there in the calf, right? That's where the muscle knot is, which is a really common place, right? What we're going to do is we're going to find that muscle knot. We're going to turn the BioZoom on, and we're going to place the attachment right in the center of that knot. If you can flex the joint to shorten the muscle, that's great, right? But we want to press down with just enough pressure until you feel slight discomfort. And then we want to extend the joint while continuing to apply pressure. And that's going to keep tissue tension on there. And that's going to allow to break up some of those adhesions while we're also doing ischemic compression where we're basically diminishing the blood flow to the area. So we always want to be pressing down, but again, never into pain as we're doing that, because ultimately the goal is to decrease blood flow to the area until the muscle knot releases. And once it releases, we take it off, we allow blood to come back in and flush that area, and then we can go on to another spot. So all that being said, The most important thing is that more is not better. Our main objective with any soft tissue treatment is basically to relax and flush the tissue. We want to lengthen and restore proper function to that tissue. So soft tissue treatments should never be painful, right? Pain increases your body's natural response to protect by flexing and tightening the surrounding tissues or the surrounding muscle. And this is a phenomenon called muscle guarding. So when we're talking before about increased amplitude and increased stall force, this increases the potential for this muscle guarding and then ultimately for tissue damage. The best example I can give you would be if somebody was going to punch you in the stomach, your natural reaction is to flex, right? To guard. Well, the same thing happens when we're increasing amplitude and we're increasing stall force. The harder you press with the more amplitude that you're exerting, right, the more potential you have for muscle guarding and the more potential you have for tissue damage. Rather, what we'd have you do is to pull through tension, right, with not as much pressure and not as much amplitude. And what that's going to do is still lengthen the muscle. You'll get plenty of depth of penetration, right? But we're doing it and we're never causing pain. It's always important to take a little bit longer to attenuate those tissues so that way we're never fighting. So in summary, and this is the most important thing, something is better than nothing. It's very important that you do some kind of recovery. If you're using your home percussive device, that's great. You can also stretch, you can foam roll, you can do anything, but it's important that you are always recovering. And we know this, right? Recovery is important for better performance, for overall well-being. If you're going to use your percussive device, make sure you have a game plan. You can always consult your physician, whether it's your chiro, your PT. You can talk to your MD, whoever is going to direct you and guide you. It's really important to have that game plan. Feel free to download the Add-A-Day app. We will guide you through the app on proper form. Important, active therapy is so much more effective than passive therapy. So we're always pulling through tension. We're following fascial lines. That being said, point and shoot is better than nothing. Just make sure you have a game plan and make sure you know what you're trying to affect. So if we're going for the calf, that we're affecting the calf and we're not going into areas that maybe potentially could hurt ourselves. More pressure is not better. And we talked about this before, right? Increasing pressure does not increase depth of penetration. So the harder you press does not mean that you're reaching deeper tissue. And more is not better. And there's no clinical research that indicates that increased amplitude or increased is associated with increased depth of penetration. So really be very careful about what you're doing and how much pressure and how much amplitude you're exerting on the body. And last but not least, motion, motion, motion. You always want to be moving. So that's what I can tell you guys. It's really important that we're always moving and we're always recovering. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me directly at drmike@addaday.com. That's DRMIKE @addaday.com. Thanks so much for listening. Have a great day.